Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew DeSantis,
And I'm Kaylie Shapiro.
and welcome to another episode of Road to the Kentucky Derby.
And the Kentucky Oaks.
Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here, along with my NYRA Bets colleague, Kaylie Shapiro, as we take you on the road to the Kentucky Derby and the Kentucky Oaks with this very final, shall we say, prep of the Derby Oaks process, as there are no Oaks prep races this weekend, but we do have one final Derby prep in the Lexington Stakes, which we'll be previewing running Saturday at Keeneland. We have a very special guest who's on site at Keeneland, actually, maybe going to be able to give us some special insights. But Kaylie, how are you doing? I feel like we started this road, feels like months ago, and now we're almost at the end of it. So it's been a long, crazy process, but a lot of fun.
So much fun. It really flew by. And I feel like the fun's really just getting started. I think that, all the time that's passed that we've been doing the videos is going to feel like we're pushing out like the same amount of content in the next 3 weeks that we have, these past few months. So I'm really excited for that. Excited for the last prep, which is more so a little bit of a Preakness prep, but still very
Yeah.
exciting. So yeah, and a pretty decent field that it drew as well. So I was excited to see that.
It is. It take the Derby prep element out of it aside. It is a nice field in the Lexington this Saturday. I
Mhm.
agree. I mean, obviously that card is going to be highlighted by the Grade One Jenny Wiley on Saturday, but that's a nice race. Though I think competitive. I think we can go a couple of different ways that we'll talk about. But listen, just as a reminder, make sure to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel. And as Kaylie mentioned, we got a lot coming for you, whether it's race previews, full card analyses, handicapping, betting tutorials, let alone all of the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks content that we have coming up, from top 5 lists to contender spotlights to potentially some on-site coverage that we're going to be doing down at Churchill Downs next week. So going to be a lot of fun. And like I said, make sure to press that like and subscribe button today. Well, we're going to bring in a guest who is on site at Keeneland, and normally he's our California representative, as we've had him come on before and preview some of the California prep races, but he's down in Lexington at Keeneland, so we got to bring in our friend Ryan Anderson. Ryan, how are you doing, and how are things? Hopefully it's a lot drier these days down in Keeneland.
It is. It's dry. It's a little cold, but I'm doing well. Staying warm for a California guy. But I mean, Keeneland is beautiful. Driving in there is like a scene out of a movie. Being at the racetrack yesterday for Bluegrass Day was incredible. That was a great first experience at Lexington at Keeneland Racecourse. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this weekend. I'll be on site tomorrow through Sunday. Definitely going to be there watching the Lexington, which, yeah, more of a Preakness prep, but with a 7-horse field, or confirmed 7-horse field with a couple of scratches.
Yeah.
But 7-horse field, 5 of those you can make a case for, a really strong case for, and they're all within 5 buyer points of each other. Those 3-year-olds can jump up start by start. It's going to be a really competitive race, start to finish, and I think the pace scenario is something that's going to be really interesting, with a couple runners coming from the same barn as well. So a lot to dive into, but I'm happy you brought the West Coast guy on, because no spoilers, but there is a horse that I like shipping in from the West Coast.
There is a horse that I think all of us like a little bit, shipping in from the West Coast in the form of Bullard, which we'll talk a little bit more about him in a bit. But like you said, a little bit more of a Preakness prep this year, and there's no real Derby horses. Dwayne Lucas's decision to train American Promise up to the Kentucky Derby really did change the complexion of this race, as that was a horse that was originally slated to run here. He didn't need any more points. He's got the 50s in the starting gate from winning that Virginia Derby. But it is interesting that Wayne has decided and opted not to run him in this spot. I mean, Wayne obviously very famous for liking to run his horses early and often, but giving this one a little bit of a layoff. So as a result, none of these horses, even if they win, really enter the Kentucky Derby picture. I don't think any of them would get into the top 30, if I'm not mistaken, at this point, even if they were to collect the 20 points that go to the winner. But listen, let's dive into this 9-horse field on paper. But Ryan, as you mentioned, 7 likely runners, as there are 2 scratches. Rolando and Touchy both ran this past weekend in the Lafayette, and therefore are not going to be running here in the Lexington Stakes. So you're down to 7 horses. Kaylie, I'll go over to you in terms of your first impressions of this race, of this field. Some horses that are stretching out, some horses that have some interesting potentially.
Yeah, it seems like horses that have good speed are going to be able to put themselves into a favorable position in this race. There's not too much speed on paper, so it'll be interesting to see how it translates, and a couple horses from the same barn as well. You do have the heavy favorite, the number 7, the Chad Brown trainee, who was very impressive last time out in that allowance race that he won. That's stretching out first time, and a few others, actually most of them, are stretching out for the first time, so should make for some pretty interesting pace dynamics. I do think that the number 6 probably has the best speed of the group and probably has an advantage from that standpoint, but curious to see how the number 7 plays the break as well, and I feel like that will kind of tell us. We'll know as soon as they break sort of how it's going to play out, depending on who goes and who doesn't.
Yeah, no, it's true. And obviously jockeys have a lot to do with this. Gosger, the number 6, jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. We saw him have a very nice day on Wednesday, some very aggressive rides that are very reminiscent of the type of ride that Irad can give. And I thought, rode really, really well on Wednesday. Flavian Pratt on Praetor. Pratt's had some questionable rides, in my opinion, at Keeneland. Not maybe the strongest start to that meet for him, even though he's picked up some wins, but he's gotten some horses into, the last race. I just know at Keeneland on Wednesday got his favorite into a couple, just a really boxed in, not the best spot. So obviously the reigning Eclipse Award winning jockey, so hard to really criticize Flavian Pratt too much on any given day. But Ryan, I'll kick things off with you in terms of our picks and our selections. You kind of already tipped your hand a little bit. West Coast horse coming east in the form of the number 3 Bullard for Micahel McCarthy. This one finished 3rd last time out in the San Vicente to Barnes and Romanesque, but a really nice looking horse. And if it can handle going 2 turns, could be pretty dangerous.
Yeah, this horse is out of Gunrunner, and I'm honestly curious why it took so long to get this horse around 2 turns. Has only tried around one turn, 7 furlongs the last couple of starts. Probably just as a late season 2-year-old, they don't run many 2-turn races out on the West Coast. So had the winner off. Has been a little stop and go trying to get him back to the races, but he's finally been consistent on the work tab. He's going to come in here for the Lexington. You have to imagine the Preakness is kind of the view going forward with this one, as he's just going to kick off his 3-year-old campaign. But being out of Gunrunner gives me a ton of confidence that this horse has grown up over the winter he's had off. He's going to grow into a bigger and a better horse. And I think he's going to best this field just based on his raw ability. Gosger and Praetor are 2 very talented horses, along with the horse number 8, Hypnus for Kenny McPeek, that we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think Bullard's going to be coming into this with the right kind of running style. He drew really nicely at post 3. I don't think the inside 2 horses are going to be a huge threat in terms of positioning early. So I'm hoping Bullard just kind of sits against the rail. Maybe Gosger and Praetor go at each other. Maybe Native Runner finds himself towards the lead. And after that, it's going to be up to Bullard and the jockey to kind of get him home in that short stretch, but he should be sitting right in that second flight, right behind the speed, and should have plenty of bottom to get there. Micahel McCarthy is more than capable of having these horses ready off this 61 to 180-day break that he's on.
Yeah, and it should be noted that Umberto Rispoli, who has ridden Bullard in all 3 starts, remains aboard. So even though the horse is shipping from California to Kentucky, Rispoli is riding at Keeneland, so he's going to remain on the mount. So obviously good that there's some familiarity there between the jockey and the horse in this particular case. But I will say this, Ryan. If a certain horse named Journalism wins the Kentucky Derby, I wonder how eager Micahel McCarthy will be to enter Bullard into the Preakness. Just something to think about. Obviously, if he's got the, Derby and maybe going for the Triple Crown. But I agree with you. It certainly feels like the Preakness is the goal for a horse like Bullard, who, as you mentioned, sired by Gunrunner, should have plenty of ability to get that distance.
Without a doubt. You bring up a great point. If your Derby favorite Journalism runs to his ability and runs to that favoritism, Micahel McCarthy is going to be in for one of the better decisions a trainer is ever going to have to make for having 2 horses ready to go in the Preakness. But I'd imagine Journalism is going to get the nod over Bullard in that case, and they'll kind of rework the plans there. But knowing Micahel McCarthy and how great of a professional he is, he already has a backup plan in the back of his mind. If that were to ever be the case. So I'm sure that's an easy, quick pivot for him. But it's better to have 2 horses ready for the same race than none. So,
yes.
Almost an embarrassment of riches if everything pans out the way it could.
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, listen, I'd love it if he, shipped up here for the Peter Pan or something like that instead. After if he doesn't end up going to the Preakness, but that's your top selection, Kaylie. You and I went in the same direction with our top selection, with the number 6 Gosger for trainer Brendan Walsh. He's had a nice start to this Keeneland spring meet, as he always seems like he does. This one though is coming off a last out maiden victory and does seem to have taken a step forward a little bit from 2 to 3, has been running down at Gulfstream Park, is trying 2 turns for the first time, but I think there's a lot to like in terms of that pedigree.
Yeah, I think so too. This one improved a lot, stretching out in his second start to a mile, got an 88 buyer speed figure, which puts him, pretty much on par with the rest of this field and your main players in here, especially your morning line favorites, last out figure as well. So I think this one has perfect pedigree, stretching out to 2 turns as well. And I think that this one has good speed and should set a nice trip here. And like you said, Brendan Walsh always does well at Keeneland and has a good start to this meet. And this horse gets Irad Ortiz aboard for the first time as well. Seems to be working well. Last 2 works at Keeneland as well. So this one was pretty interesting to me. A way to play against the morning line favorite. The pedigree definitely was what stood out to me, and also how much the horse improved, stretching out in distance in just a second start. And also, I think that he should be able to clear, the horses to his inside, and depending on maybe how Praetor breaks, I don't really think that horse is much of a threat in terms of his speed with the number 6. I think the number 6 might be a little bit faster, so should be able to sit a nice trip. I do want to say my order is 635, not 653. Just wanted to point that out.
We'll get that.
Yeah, of course.
We'll get that edited, Kaylie. We'll get that edited for prosperity. And so here we go. We got it. Now we just have 6. Sorry. The only one horse.
No
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say another note on Gosger is the Gulfstream dirt form has held up really, really well so far at Keeneland. The Gulfstream dirt horses and then the Turfway Park turf horses have both held up really well in their form. The winner in the last race at Keeneland today was 46 or something to 1. Last race was at Turfway. Had a couple huge winners on the card. Gulfstream Park dirt form has held up really well, with Skateaway winning the feature race on today's card, coming out of a 2-turn race at Gulfstream. So that form's really held up. So that's certainly a vote of confidence in the form of Gosger and for the number 7 Praetor. But I'm with you. I would think Gosger has a really big shot here, stretching out for Brendan Walsh.
Yeah, and I think that you have – so, Kaylie, now you and I have the exact same exacta, so that doesn't make it any fun. It was more fun when you had 653. Just be different. No. I agree with you. The Gulfstream Park form has been holding up very well, both on the turf in terms of synthetic to turf as well as on the dirt. And what I would always say is when it comes to Keeneland, that transition to Gulfstream Park, very nice, except if it's a Saffie Joseph horse. If it's a Saffie horse, you just fade that horse. And now Saffie is 2 for 84 over the last 5 years in stakes races in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So just something to keep in mind. 1 for 23 at Keeneland specifically during that stretch. He doesn't have any horses in this race, but something just to keep in mind if you see Saffie horses entered into any of the stakes races over the next week or so. Listen, I agree with you about, the Gosger's form should be able to travel up. I think this horse, stretching out, Kaylie, like you said, it's not surprising that you saw a little bit of a perk up. I think it has less to do with Lasix, and I think it has more to do with the distance. Because if you look in that debut victory or that debut effort where he finished 4th, he was still making up a lot of ground in that race. And was just sitting further back, sprinting 6 furlongs. I think this horse doesn't want to sprint 6 furlongs. This horse wants to go 2 turns. So ultimately, that's a horse that I'm obviously very high on. You're high on as well. Ryan, you and I both have the number 7 Praetor in our top 3. This is a horse for Chad Brown. And Chad Brown, very good at getting horses ready for the Preakness. Sometimes they'll skip the Derby and go to the Preakness as a result. We saw that with early voting. We've seen that with others. But this is a horse, exceptional speed. Took a step back from a buyer speed figure standpoint, but beat better company last time out than he did in his maiden. If he can bounce back to that maiden number, certainly is going to be a very tough competitor in this race.
Without a doubt. And I think the buyer speed figure ended up coming back a little light. The time form came back around 103, so that put him around an 83-ish buyer, so not that much higher. A little bit of a downside to Praetor is he's had 2 of those runners in that last race come back. One was Kinetic Control, who ran back today, and I believe he was 8th by over 20 lengths, so that's not ideal and what you want to see. And then another one came back and really didn't do much. I think ran a 62 buyer, finished 5th or 6th. So maybe the form hasn't held up too well, but Praetor beat that field the right way. So that's also something where you don't really have to look at who he beat. That was clearly a comeback race, and there were bigger things on the agenda for Praetor than the allowance win at Gulfstream. So you can look into that what you will. I think Praetor going second off the bench here for Chad Brown. This seems like it was always the goal once he kind of got rolling with Praetor in his 3-year-old season. Obviously, I think if everything went the right way, Bluegrass probably would have been the point, the point for Praetor, but things haven't worked out that way. I think he fits really well in with this group of developing 3-year-olds who kind of got a late start to their season. And you mentioned it. This looks like the kind of Preakness route that we've seen with early voting. We've seen with Top Connor. There's another one I'm thinking of that was in not too long ago, but we've seen this move time and again from Chad Brown. So I'm hoping for a 1st or 2nd place finish out of Praetor, ideally 2nd, because I'm really bullish on Bullard, if you will. But I think a strong showing from Praetor going ahead to the Preakness, that's gonna make all the difference. But Praetor's got a ton of talent, so I'm looking forward to seeing him run.
Yeah, I agree. He does have a ton of talent, and you look at those running lines, he's faced some very, very tough competition, obviously seeing Ferocious in debut and then running against Sovereignty and beating Sovereignty in that second start. And so that was, again, a really impressive effort to do that. And one of the things I'll say is, it's always a little dangerous, and I play the game, like you just said, Ryan, of looking at, how did the horses run coming out of this last race? That's one of the reasons I was a little cooler on Grande this past week in the Wood Memorial, was the 2 horses he beat, Ginny's Dailies and Indecisiveness, came back and ran absolutely nothing races in the Florida Derby. And I thought, well, geez, how good was that horse really in terms of who he beat? Well, he comes up here and runs a really good race in the Wood Memorial and punches his ticket to the Kentucky Derby. So, he's going to be, sometimes you don't want to always put too much faith in, who they beat in terms of that, because it was such a dominating victory in that effort by winning by over 7 lengths for Praetor. Now, Kaylie, you have Bullard in your second position. I know we already kind of touched on him a little bit. Didn't know if you wanted to add anything about that or talk about a little bit of a long shot that you're taking with the number 5 native runner.
Yeah. Well, I guess first, I included Bullard because I think he has really good speed compared to the rest. I know he wasn't ever really sitting close in those races out in California, but I think it should translate pretty well with this group of horses at Keeneland. And I think that should help him sit a nice trip as well. And seems very intentional to place this horse here. Definitely for a larger goal of the Preakness, but Mike McCarthy definitely means business sending this horse here, one that has beaten quality and has been running against quality horses out in California. So definitely wanted to include him. I did leave Praetor off. Realistically, if I wasn't trying to take a shot with maybe a price underneath these other 2, I would have included him. I think he's a horse that has a lot of talent, but he is stretching out in distance. He isn't into mischief. We've seen this tail a few times with the into mischief stretching out. The way that he broke his maiden, that day that he beat Sovereignty, Sovereignty, I think, actually broke in first that day. So that kind of tells you everything about the speed that was present in that race. He definitely, faced a little bit of pressure there, but nothing that impressed me too much looking back on, especially seeing Sovereignty so forwardly placed. And then in the last outwin, he won by 7.5 lengths. Definitely, I remember watching that live. I think the horse is very nice, and I was impressed by that. But yeah, he is stretching out in distance. He is 2-1 on the morning line. He does have, he's out of a Curlin mare, so that's really good in terms of maybe some promise in terms of stretching out in the future, but definitely wanted to take a little bit of a wait and see approach with this one and see, the type of trip that he sits on Saturday. One that I'm not positive that I'll leave off my tickets come race day, but yeah, I am going to try to play against him. I did land on, I used the 6 and the 3. I think they're going to sit really nice trips. And then I tried to look for a horse that I thought would be making up some ground towards the end of the race, because it's also not a guarantee that there's going to be a fast pace here. There probably won't be. So a horse that did stick out to me was the number 5, native runner for Kenny McPeek, who's been able to close into races that, had pretty slow fractions. The way that he broke his maiden, he was sitting 12 lengths off the leader and made up a ton of ground to get that win that day. So that definitely stuck out to me. He's a son of Leobon, who's the son of Uncle Mo, out of a Bernardini mare. So definitely has the pedigree to handle this. And then that last out figure of an 84 is definitely stacking up nicely with this group, especially if he's able to take a step up. And not to mention, he gets the same rider he got there, Jose Ortiz, back aboard again. So that's a really good sign. And Calumet, Calumet at Keeneland, they're just going right across the street to their backyard with this one. They definitely want to take serious. So I'm going to be taking a little bit of a shot with this one underneath my 2 top picks.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's a very versatile horse in that, obviously, like you said, he came from well off the pace in that maiden victory in a maiden optional claimer 50 down at Fairgrounds that was taken off the turf. And then last time out against restricted optional claiming company, went straight to the front pretty much so, and won in gate to wire fashion. Now, the fractions weren't overwhelming that day, but they were legitimate, certainly. So this horse, has a bullet leading up to this. I do wonder if the plan is maybe to go a little bit and Hypnus and try to maybe set things up for Hypnus, who is the other Kenny McPeek horse who comes from off the pace, although that horse is getting blinkers. So that horse might also show a little bit more tactical speed than he has in the past, but definitely took a long look at Native Runner. But it is well documented that I am never on the right Kenny McPeek horse. And so my solution was to select neither of them. See, that's really 4-dimensional chess right there. If you're never on the right McPeek, just don't pick any of them. And so let's transition from talking about the one to the other. Ryan, you have number 8, Hypnus, the other McPeek horse, and really the main McPeek horse, I think some people would say, in this race. As your third selection. Certainly a horse that looked really good on debut, has been running against much tougher company on the Derby trail, and now, admittedly, is getting probably a little bit of a class reduction to this field.
Big class reduction. Completely agree. This horse 2 back lost to Coal Battle, Matticat Road, and Sandman, then ran in the Louisiana Derby and lost to Tistastic. Now, a note on Hypnus. He is a horse that I think really, really loves an off track. His best career performance came in the maiden breaking over a sloppy sealed track. And then his last workout, which also notably came in blinkers, was over a muddy surface, and that was a Bullet 47. So there was some rain in the forecast for Lexington. It's been pretty on and off. It hasn't been really confirmed. It looks like the worst is over. But if this track did come up with on and off surface, I would probably use Hypnus on top. But if we're on a fast track, I think underneath, this horse should be a little sharper, hopefully a little closer to the pace. With the blinkers on in this spot. I'm hoping for this one to, finish a good trying third. I think I'm going to use Bullard on top. I like Native Runner a lot underneath. For me, I think Kenny McPeek has a real shot with that, with Jose aboard. Obviously, love to Gosger and Praetor as well, but I think Hypnus probably going to be hindered by that short stretch a little bit, but I think has a ton of talent to move forward and could keep developing into a really nice horse. Only the one win, but has run the same race every time. So I like to see that consistency with these 3-year-olds. So I hope he can continue to build upon that.
The other thing to mention with Hypnus is he's going to be facing a shorter field than he's faced the last couple of times. I mean, it's going to be 7 horses. So again, even if they didn't add the blinkers, it was hard to imagine he was going to be sitting 12, 15 lengths back in a more consolidated field. So he's probably going to be a little bit closer just because they're going to be a little bit more clumped up just naturally. And so not going to give himself as much to do in that short stretch, like you mentioned. So going to be a lot of fun to watch this one. And, these are, again, some late developing horses. Ryan, you mentioned it, who, whether they run in the Preakness in a couple of weeks or not, or in a month and a half or not. These are horses we might see this summer in Saratoga. These are horses that are going to be late developing. Maybe there's a Travers horse in here that is just kind of a late developer. So this is a race that you really want to be paying attention to, I think, as a fan of the sport, just to make sure, hey, who's on the come up right now? Because one of the things we see is the Kentucky Derby takes a lot out of horses. And it's not uncommon for horses to run in the Derby and then take a little time off. Or for some of those 3-year-olds that are running in the Derby, hey, they were the most precocious of this crop. Well, now suddenly you're starting to see some of these other horses develop and turn into potentially bigger runners. So whether it's out in the West Coast with a horse like Bullard, who could go back out west and make some noise this summer out there, or potentially, looking at some of these other horses, it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a ton of fun. We have a lot to look forward to. Obviously, the Grade 3 Lexington going as the co-feature this weekend, with the Grade 1 Jenny Wiley following right after. That's also a really deep and competitive field. You mentioned it, though. I love this path that kind of avoids the Derby. If you don't have that superstar kind of A-plus caliber horse, the kind of looking back, you go to like the Epicenters is a horse that was able to come out of running a really good Derby and came out to win the Travers later that summer. So it takes a horse like that with that amount of skill and just talent and overall ability to be able to, make it through the Derby, because you mentioned it. That is a chaotic race. It takes a lot out of a horse. You're getting primed up for your A-plus effort, and then you go out there and you really have to give 110% as the horse on as well as the jockey. But that's a all or nothing type of race, and sometimes it takes a while to get that reset and back on track. So I think there's kind of that upper echelon that you look for that can come out of the Derby and still be well, but then there's that secondary group where, maybe you need to hit the reset button. But going through the Lexington Stakes here, I think is a really strong move to set up for a strong summer campaign. So look for a lot of these to show up at Saratoga over the summer without a doubt. Maybe Bullard out on the West Coast in some of our good races once Del Mar gets to town. But the Lexington Stakes as the Preakness prep, so to speak, is going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, no, it absolutely will be. And I appreciate you filibustering while my internet went in and out. And so that was much appreciated. Hopefully I was not frozen with a stupid expression on my face, but I have a feeling I probably was. So it's all right. Kaylie, you're excited for this big weekend. Obviously, we got pick 6 tomorrow for the carryover, but got a lot of great races between this and the Jenny Wiley and some of the other turf races that we have.
Yes, I'm so excited. And at least, obviously, like we talked about the whole Preakness thing with the Lexington, but in terms of the Derby, it will be cool to see at least some of these horses like Bullard and Hypnus have run against, horses that are going to be in the Derby. So
yeah,
you can, that's going to be helpful to see how these run. And then also, of course, I think, Torpedo Anna runs on Saturday. So I'm definitely pretty excited about that. Lots of great racing this weekend.
I know what headwear you're going to have at work on. I know you're going to have your Torpedo Anna hat, and you're going to be rocking that on Saturday for her run in the Apple Blossom. It looks like her main competition is probably going to be Where's My Ring, but she's obviously looking. Well, listen, whether you want to, don't roll your eyes at me, Kaylie.
No, just kidding.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun, and obviously she's looking to go 2 for 2, get that another grade 1 for her in that Apple Blossom. We saw a horse like Clairiere win this race a couple of years ago. I remember Steve Asmussen sprinting down the stretch as Clairiere was winning. He was so happy that Joel Rosario gave just an amazing ride, I remember. So, this race produces some thrilling finishes and some great winners. So going to be a lot of fun. And I'm sure you'll make some content for us on NYRA Bets, whether it's written or video, about that race. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But Ryan, thank you again for joining. I really appreciate you coming on, making some time during your trip down to Keeneland.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. And this is a ton of fun to talk about another deep and competitive race. And
let the people know where they can find you and what else you have going on.
That's right. You can find me over at the Gallop Out on YouTube. Got Get Bucked and Big Hoof Energy are 2 shows. Big Hoof Energy, obviously, with Kaylie Shapiro is one of the co-hosts as well. We won't be doing much this week. We'll probably put out our picks on X for the Lexington Stakes, maybe a few of the other big ones. We'll probably throw the Apple Blossom in there just so we can all put Torpedo Anna on top and feel good that we have a winner this weekend. But moving forward, we'll go twice a week as normal with our weekly shows once this kind of Keeneland madness is over with this fun week of racing. So over at the Gallop Out on YouTube or at 20 Links Clear on X.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. Kaylie, thank you as well. And thank you all for tuning into this episode of the NYRA Bets Road to the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks. For Ryan Anderson and Kaylie Shapiro, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.